We are live. We are live streaming. I am with Sacred Blue Heron Woman, who is here to share many wonderful things with you. I'm Julian Katari, and this is the 81st conversation we've had. We have one like this every week, and we cover a lot of different things in the conversations. And these last, say, five, a little bit more conversations we've been dwelling on the great principle, which is kind of like the scientific discovery of God.
Right.
And in that, that great principle has five branches, and we've been covering each one of those branches. We covered the governance branch, which took us about 3 sessions, and right now we're going to start with the sustain branch, this new branch. So that's what we've been talking about. That's what has been happening here. And it's a whole bunch of many more things that happen as we have these sessions and we have these conversations. It's kind of like a pot of many magical things that come together.
Yeah.
So welcome everyone, and here we are. Here we go with today's conversation, today's channeling.
So, good evening. And we're not going to have words from the old ones today because every single word today is directly dictated, channeled by, right? So let's start with what's going on in the sky right now. If you look it up, you would see that there was a hybrid solar eclipse. It said April 19 to April 20. Well, I've been focusing on tomorrow being the day of the eclipse and totally forgot that Australia is a whole day ahead of us. So today's already this hybrid eclipse happened. So a hybrid solar eclipse is a really rare and strange astronomical event that happened today.
So what's the hybrid about?
We're going to go into that right now. Okay. So if you talk to eclipse chasers, they will tell you there are three types of solar eclipses. The first is a partial eclipse, and it's the most common and it's the least impressive because the moon only blocks part of the sun and sends a shadow, which is called the penumbra, across a portion of the earth. So that happens every 18 months. There's a partial solar eclipse every 18 months. Not a big deal. It's kind of like a full moon that activates, opens, right? Kind of speeds things up, but not real powerful. Okay, so the second is an annular solar eclipse where the grandmother moon blocks out the center of grandfather, elder, son, brother, sun, but leaves. There's a circle of sun seen around the moon. This is called the annular or ring of fire eclipse. Yeah. And then the third is the total, where the entirety of the sun's disk is blocked by the moon. Okay. And it causes a swath of darkness, dusk-like darkness. Yeah. Now, those are the three most common. We experienced in 2017, we experienced a total solar eclipse, August 17, 2020, August 21, 2017. We experienced a total solar eclipse that covered the entire continent of the United States and part of the Bahamas. That's the first time that happened in over 100 years. The last one was in 1918. Okay, but let's go back to this hybrid solar eclipse, which is the fourth kind. It happens every 10 years, so only a few times per century, and it's a combination of the other three types. And it's because of that, it's impossible to experience in all its glory. So it starts out as a partial, it goes to ring of fire, it goes to total, it goes to ring of fire, and it finishes with a partial. That's the hybrid.
Okay.
It happened over a part of East Timor and Australia today. And you would say that, well, that's not a big deal. It is a big deal because the last time we had a hybrid solar eclipse like this was November 3, 2013. And a year later, December 4, 2014, I put my house on a truck and headed for Oklahoma to start this mission. And it didn't happen. That hybrid solar eclipse did not happen over the US either. It's most potent in the areas where it happened, but it covers the entire globe.
That's good to know.
Yeah. With its energy. So what happened today and over the last 2 weeks since the full moon is that we had a 10-year calendar close and a new one is opening. So now here's another chance to set your 10-year vision for what you want to see happen, what you want to see birth over the next 10 years till the next hybrid eclipse.
Okay.
And you have a 2-week window to get this because we have a lunar eclipse happening then in 2 weeks on May 5 with the full moon. And this lunar eclipse that will happen, she will be in her deepest into the shadow of Mother. I don't truly understand this yet. I'll do some more research. It's going to be the deepest eclipse of the century.
The one that's coming,
the lunar eclipse that's coming up with the full moon.
Or when is that coming?
May 5.
Okay. Oh well, that's before. Okay. Because there's the solar one coming on 2024, if I'm not.
Yeah. Then there's a total solar eclipse coming. Now we'll talk more about. So we had August 1, 2008. There was a total solar eclipse over the Northwest Territories, up close to the North Pole. That was the year my Army career went down the toilet. Okay. We have a total solar eclipse. So we had the total solar eclipse on August 21, 2017 that covered the entire continent of the United States. We have on April 8, 2024, we will have a solar eclipse that goes from Mexico, the finger of Mexico, so to speak, that comes down from California.
The lower California, Baja California. Yeah.
Is that Baja? That island-like projection? Okay, so it starts just south of a couple hundred miles, looks like probably south of there, and heads through Texas, southeast Oklahoma. It'll barely miss us. Arkansas, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and on up through Canada. So this one is involving Mexico and the eastern part of the U.S. As it goes around the world. The next total one after that won't be till 2033 over the U.S. And that's actually will be way north in Canada over Alaska again. Okay. So these are some pretty amazing times we're living in here with and you might say, oh, it's just a celestial event. There's no such thing as just a celestial event that does not impact us because we are all also celestial beings. So think about it. Last hybrid solar eclipse, November 3, 2013, a year later, I knew nothing about it. The celestial events can't make you do things, they trigger decisions. So November 3, 2013, December 4, 2014, I'm loading a truck moving to start my new life, my new mission.
Right. So that's the time frame or the celestial frame from which this is unfolding.
Yeah.
So how do you tie that with the sustain principle?
Okay, so yeah, so now we'll merge. So now the great principle. Okay, so we've all asked for centuries, is there a God? And like we've talked about, every time science has proved admirably that there is a God, there is a force field that is called the great principle. And the scientific definition of the word principle is that it must create, constitute, govern, sustain, and contain. So what is it? We have not yet asked, what is it that the great principle or God created? What is it that is constituted, and what is it that is governed, and what is it that is now that we're talking about sustaining? What is it? Let's be little kids. Let's be curious like little kids and say, what is it? Well, the simple answer to that is life and all the beings of life. So what is life? Well, the rhythm of life is beautiful, as it is always spinning its patterns, and each pattern always goes on to foster more and more and more life. Of course, the patterns change, the patterns evolve, and as they evolve, life evolves. So at every moment, everything is evolving because it's part of the creative flow, the flux of the great principle, creation, God, the grandmothers, the old ones. Flow creates change, and change creates more flow. So life is always forever in the process of becoming something else, being and becoming. So how does God, or the great principle, or the old one, sustain life and all its beings? The simple answer is autopoiesis, metabolism, reproduction, inquiry, and knowing.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
So tonight we're going to start with inquiry. And it's this chain of this branch is an invitation for anyone listening to refrain from your habit, as well as my habit, of falling into the temptation of certainty. Because that limits. So inquiry is based on a simple but profound truth. The truth of being the ultimate principle, God. And this truth of being, that you are a being, a human being of the sacred principle, freely reveals itself to anyone who wants to know the truth of this reality and is willing to wholeheartedly surrender to not knowing and remain open and curious about what the totality of that truth is. And there is no end to the totality of the truth. It's always shifting and changing. That doesn't mean it's not truth. So the true nature and sustenance of all is being and becoming. Everything is made up of this beingness, dynamic beingness. Nature, all of nature, rocks, even though they don't seem very dynamic, they most certainly are dynamic beings. People, animals, clouds, peach trees, the mosquitoes that we hate so much, the flies that we hate so much, they're all dynamic beings. All these things in our life, everything. So what we are really seeing is the various forms of being, the great principle, God. So to understand being, the nature of what we all truly are, we must penetrate the inner fundamental nature of existence, of life. We must then question what we think we are. So most of us are like a river. 99.9% of us are like a river that doesn't know it's fundamentally composed of water, and so it's afraid of expanding because it might not be a river anymore. So once you know that you're water, what difference does it make if you're a river, a lake, or the ocean?
I haven't thought of that.
It doesn't, really. So being is what constantly manifests as us, humans. human beings, and every other thing we see. So being thinks by using your brain. It walks by using your legs. Yet in our daily experience, we think we are a bundle of arms and legs and thoughts and do not experience the unity that underlies everything. That we are 50 trillion cell beings living in harmony, heaven under one roof, our skin. So being manifests itself through us as human beings. In us, being beholds its beauty and celebrates its majesty and sustains itself. Our human soul is the pure potentiality of being, and it's also the way that being, in all its magnificence, opens up and manifests its richness. So as human beings, we are universes of experiences, multifaceted and multidimensional. Each of us is a soul, a dynamic consciousness, a magical organism or organ of experience and action. And each of us is in a constant state of transformation, of one experience opening up to another, one action leading to another, one perception multiplying into many others, of perception growing into knowledge, knowledge leading to action, and action creating more experience. This unfolding is constant, dynamic, and full of energy, and it is the nature of what we call life and the sustenance of what we call life, the sustainment. So the beauty and sustainment of life is that it is meant to be a continuous opening to the full range of experience and the richness possible, the dynamic unfolding of potential. Inquiry opens up to a true understanding so deep it unfolds the fullness of our potential and sustains us. The essential world of being human, being a conscious soul, is opening up each moment in which we discover it. So us as human beings are dynamic consciousness with intelligence and potentiality that we just cannot encompass with our brain. There is no end to the adventure of being. Being is infinite and its possibilities are endless. Mystery is not due to limitation in our capacity to understand it, because mystery is intrinsic to the reality of beingness, of life, the life of a human being. Mystery is intrinsic to this, but we shut down the mystery. It's inexhaustible. You can never know it totally. The mystery is not only stillness, it's knowledge. Yet holding on to any knowledge of discoveries disconnects from the inexhaustibility of being, and that's what David Bohm said. Holding on to any knowledge keeps us from becoming the undivided wholeness that we are in each moment. So inquiry means investigation, exploration, a wanting to find out. The heart of a question is obviously an unknowing. However, a question is not just an unknowing, because unknowing by itself does not necessarily mean that there's a question. The unknowing is the ignorance, right? And if you want to stay ignorant, you don't ask a question. So it's possible not to know, and it's possible not to question, or it's possible to ignore that you want to know something so that you can remain ignorant. And you cannot ask a question unless you think that you do not know something. So it's not that you know that you do not know. You also know something about what you do not know. Otherwise, you wouldn't ask a question about it. So there's a little bit you know about something, but you want to know, right? There's more you don't know, so you ask.
Right. And you know, I observe people a lot repeating what they know, which then they don't really know as well, instead of focusing their attention in learning more.
Right.
Yeah, that happens.
Or inquiry. It's, you know, they say, well, I am, because I've got two PhDs and I'm working on a third. I'm learning. Well, that's not inquiry. That's a whole different. And we'll get to that. So the flavor of a knowing unknowing is how unfoldment arises. Something is coming up. You remember I told you the myth of Metis, Zeus's first wife, right? He thought she was going to give birth to a kid that was going to be more powerful than him. So he conned her into shape-shifting into a fly, and he swallowed her. But meanwhile, she was pregnant with Athena, and Athena grew and developed fully until she started knocking on Zeus's head, and he had this headache. Something was coming up, and he had whoever hit his head with an axe, and out springs Athena. This is how unfoldment works. Athena, fully grown, right? So being is heaving up. I had to laugh when because I just told you this a few weeks ago in a voice message, right? There's something coming up. I'm having a headache. I feel like I'm giving birth to Athena. Something is coming up because being is heaving up inside us, presenting one of its possibilities, and that possibility is approaching our knowing consciousness. It's Metis heaving up, ready to spring Athena forth, right? It's approaching with something you haven't known before, and this is touching someplace within your heart. So the touching prompts a question, and the question is what produces Athena springing forth, right? So inquiry means unknowing, which is the expression of unfolding wholeness, of the creative dynamism of being. The dynamism of being, the great principle, is continuous, spontaneous unfoldment into greater and greater wholeness as the universe is constantly expanding into more and more wholeness. So inquiry is the expression of the dynamism, the expression of unfolding wholeness. The moment your experience is static, the dynamism is not creative and there's no questioning. And often we live in a rut without questioning it. We're interested, we're not interested, we're not curious, we have no reason to inquire. Well, what does that mean? It means that our experience is so static, nothing is moving. It means we're essentially dead. Remember, an organism in balance is dead. Mm-hmm. The more inquiry is open-ended, the more its power is released. The power is the power of the dynamism of being itself. And inquiry brings in a love and joyfulness, the dynamism of being for transformation and sustainment. We can't begin to inquire into a perception if we think we know all there is to know about it, because inquiry begins from a not knowing, and as an acknowledgement of the ignorance has implicit in it an openness to know. So we have to acknowledge that we are ignorant of knowing something, or we don't know something. Sometimes we're deliberately ignorant. We deliberately ignore it, so we don't ask the question, right? The openness of inquiry reflects the openness of true nature. So the core of inquiry has to be an openness to what is present in experience, to what we know of the experience and what we do not know. It's an openness to seeing things as they are, openness for them to change, and for change to reveal more of your essential being, dynamic beingness. Openness means you're not stuck in, I know this, I've done this for 15 years and that's all there is to it. I've already accomplished it and there's no more to inquire about. That's not openness. Right. Openness means that no knowledge is final knowledge. Inquiry is open to knowledge of now, and it's also open to the next moment to bring about a totally new and different knowledge. Openness means no fixation, no rigidity, no closing down. It's the expression of spaciousness in the mind, in the knowing capacity. And you can never conclude the inquiry, because to conclude the inquiry is to stop the unfoldment of more wholeness, to stop the dynamism, but dynamism can't really be stopped. So you're just going to bind it for a while and distort it if you try to close down an inquiry. Nature is infinite in its possibilities because it is the great mystery, the old ones. And they say, we were a hidden treasure. We loved to be known, so we created it all. They, or God, want to know their nature, their possibilities, their manifestation. This love to know themselves appears in us too as the love to inquire. It appears in us as the love to know of God wanting to know herself, the old ones wanting to know themselves. Love motivates inquiry, for inquiry is not only openness to what perception presents, it's a love of finding out what's really there. Love brings in the dynamism that now says, I'm so open to seeing, I'm going to get engaged in this. I'm going to jump into the middle of the experience with my hands and feet and dig because I love to find out. And that's pretty much been the journey of my life for the last 7 years. So the aim of inquiry is not to arrive at conclusions, which is what science does. Science has, you have to have the hypothesis, right?
Yeah.
So they're not truly inquiring. So the aim of inquiry is not to arrive at conclusions, it's to enjoy the exploration and the thrill of discovery. Openness includes openness to the mind and its accumulated knowledge, and it's also open to the mind's being incomplete and inaccurate.
Mm-hmm.
Openness can go further and further till it becomes absolute. However, once it becomes absolute, it has no position.
Right.
Right? So however, if you have an agenda, then you believe you know what is supposed to happen. If you create that hypothesis, you believe you think you know what's going to happen. So there's no longer openness. You can't start from a fixed state.
A conclusion is always tied to an agenda. That's interesting too.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't start from a fixed state or the hypothesis of an end state because that limits openness and constrains us to go only one way. So inquiry is not oriented towards solving a problem. And you cannot bind yourself into a corner when you are inquiring because you can always ask another question. Mm-hmm. So we could say that inquiry is a process of always opening and opening, endlessly opening from any place, any direction, any level, any position. Everything now becomes new, disclosing itself in a new light. And inquiry actually does not have to be asked with words. And I would have to say right now that the majority of what I've been gleaning has not been inquiry asked with words. Most of the time it's just a And sometimes I don't even actually consciously know that I'm going, that doesn't quite make sense. Yeah. But it's there in my mind. And because it's there, it's opened me to inquiry. And then somehow I'm directed to the right book or the right, and it's always popping up. And that's been truly my journey for the last 7 years. And I know it's been somewhat before then, but I can really pinpoint this since we got to Oklahoma. That has truly been my journey. Mm-hmm. So being then is always opening up with power and with energy, with strength, with intelligence, with gentleness. Sometimes the opening is delicate. Sometimes it's slow. Sometimes it's fast. And sometimes it's bursting, gushing like a fire hose. And sometimes it's very quiet. Bursting like a fire hose is pretty accurate. So inquiry is really a manifestation of the creative dynamism of our being. Inquiry invites new knowledge, and knowledge will develop and reveal the possibilities inherent in our true being. Inquiry needs to involve elements of true nature itself to take us beyond conventional experience. So inquiry can become the center of life as life becomes the unfolding of our soul. If life is not a continuing inquiry, engaging the unfolding of our souls, then it is not an ongoing transformation, and we are stuck. In a deep sense, we're dead. Mired in inertia, repeating the same patterns. inertial patterns, and this is what we've discussed about before. Remember, morphogenic fields settle at the lowest state of that's resonance, right? Inertial patterns do not need any energy. It's not settling at a lowest state of what keeps it together, because the habitual behaviors of inertial patterns, inertial death-dealing patterns, just keep on going, fueled by the energy generated from the momentum of conditioning, which is the gravity that keeps pulling us back to the same terrain. It's not the resonance. Okay. It's the energy of the inertial patterns that keep us pulling us back to the terrain. So inquiry actually could be a science in the sense that it can be very objective and precise. However, it's more an art that needs an organic, wholehearted, comprehensive kind of responsiveness that is not rigid or bound by rules, concepts, or positions. Inquiry always modulates itself so that it is appropriate to what you are inquiring about, adjusting as the state, the subject of inquiry changes, the governing principle of Wu Wei, right? In inquiry, we must consider that everything is constantly changing and that experience never remains fixed. Inquiry can be so responsive that at times it recognizes that it needs to cease for a while. And I've experienced that too. And the moments of ceasing are getting less and less. And sometimes they're longer. And then I'm like, oh, wow, the stack of books is getting shorter. This is good. And then I read something and something pops open, something beingness heaves up, and the stack of books gets taller.
Wow.
So no matter what form inquiry takes, it is always responsive to the unfoldment of being, because it is an invocation of that unfoldment. And this is what I was trying to say. This is what this solar eclipse and all celestial events trigger, is this unfoldment. And you can either distort it or stop it. I mean, but you can't really truly stop it. It's going to push you somehow. Okay, but you can either fully unfold with it or you can chain it.
Right.
So this is where experience is a pure illumination and unfoldment, where every moment is a spontaneous inquiry, a revelation of the inexhaustibility of being, and that's what sustains life, through inquiry. So now we're going to go on, and this is also, it's not channeled through me. We're going to go further. We've covered it in one. I took the whole book of Francisco Varela, and I think I covered it in 2 classes. We're going to cover the whole book from here as knowledge, tree of knowledge. So the experience of a blind spot. If you take a spot and look at it and put your thumb over it, it's gonna move, or you won't see it, or you don't even have to put your thumb over it. If you just stare at it long enough, it's going to disappear. And that's the experience of the blind spot. The area of our retina where our optic nerve emerges is not sensitive to light, so it's known as our blind spot. So how come we don't walk around with a hole in our vision all the time? Because our visual experience is that of continuous space. So unless we do experiments, we don't perceive the discontinuity that's always there. So if we do experiments, then we know that we do not see that which we do not see.
Yeah, makes sense.
So another experiment, find a lamp without a shade, place it where you can make shadows with it on a blank white wall, make a paper tube the size of the light bulb in the lamp, and use some red filter as a red cellophane as a filter. Now turn on the light and place your hand in the beam of light that comes, you put the tube of red cellophane over the light bulb, place your hand in that light, what color would you see on the wall? I don't know. I haven't done this experiment. And you can do this experimenting with different colors of transparent papers and light bulbs of varying intensity, which tells us, this experiment tells us that we are used to thinking that color is the quality of objects and the light they reflect. But if we had an instrument to measure the light composition, we would find that there are no wavelengths called blue. There's no wavelength called green. There's no wavelength that's yellow. There's no wavelength that's purple or red. We would only see a distribution of waves.
Okay.
Now, from my study
something, yeah, kind of.
of the elementals, it's the elementals that give the color.
Okay.
So what were you going to say?
Well, I was thinking kind of everything's relative to something. So, because, well, in painting, what happens is that you, like, the color you're seeing it because it's relevant to another color that's next to it. So, like, if your painting is like mostly, let's say, red colors and browns and stuff and purples, to you something might look purple, but because it's in relation to the other colors. But if you take it apart, you might find that it was actually a gray, right?
Right.
So that's what made sense to me when you said about this experiment where there is no like fixed wavelength for a color. Rather, it's just a kind of a relevant position to another. So
right. Remember the gradient, right? Life is a gradient.
Right. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's no fixed anything.
No, there's not. So our experience with our world of colored objects is literally independent of the wavelength composition of the light coming from any scene we look at. There is no way we can trace a correspondence between the great color consistency of the objects we see and the light coming from them. So we're not going to go into an explanation of how we see colors here. The important thing is for us to stop thinking that the color of the objects we see is determined by the features of the light we receive from the objects. Rather, we must concentrate on understanding that the experience of a color corresponds to a specific pattern of states of activity in your nervous system, the elementals. So we can correlate our naming of colors with states of neuronal activity, not wavelengths. And these states of neuronal activity can be triggered by a number of different light perturbations. So what states of neuronal activity are triggered by different perturbations is determined in each one of us by our individual structure and not by the feature of the perturbing agent. So the same perturbing agent that causes a trigger, it will cause a different perception in each person. So perturbation simply means a state of being agitated. Its root is the Latin word perturbationem, meaning confusion, disorder, disturbance. So a perturbation is a disruption of the norm, of the comfort. So our experience of reality is moored to our structure in a binding way. We don't see the space of the world. We live our field of vision. We don't see colors of the world. We live our chromatic space. It is absolutely doubtless that we experience a world every minute of every day. So now we're going to examine how we got to know this world that we experience every minute of every day. And we're going to find out that we cannot separate our history of actions, both biological and social, from how this world appears to us. So when we stand in front of a mirror and look at the reflection we see, it's the moment we become aware of that part of ourself that we can't see any other way. right? We can't see that part of ourselves unless we look into a mirror. We never stop and think about conundrums like this. Reflection is a process of knowing how you know. It's an act of turning back onto yourself, like inquiry, and the only chance to discover your blindness and then recognize that the certainties and knowledge of others are as tenuous as your own. We have been programmed and keyed to action, not reflection, and so our personal life is generally blind to itself. It's as if there's a taboo in us that says it's forbidden to know about knowing, especially since the Bible story talks about the Garden of Eden with the tree of knowledge of good and evil and how we were cast out of the garden for eating of the fruit, right? So maybe one of the reasons we avoid tapping the roots of our knowledge is that it gives us a slightly dizzy and overwhelming sensation due to the circularity. It's like asking our eyes to see itself. So we all know that drawing of the hand drawing each other, right? This drawing shows this dizziness very clearly because the hands are drawing each other in such a way that the origin of the process is unknown and which one is the real hand. So the process of deepening now is to put aside our daily tendency to treat our experiences with a seal of certainty as though they reflect an absolute world and open, there's that word again, to the constant awareness that the phenomenon of knowing cannot be taken as though there are facts or objects out there to grasp and store in our head. The experience of anything out there is validated in a special way by our human form structure, which makes possible the thing that's out there. That thing wouldn't be out there if we weren't in this thing. This circularity, this reciprocity, Ayni, between action and experience, the inseparability between a particular way of being and how the world appears to us tells us that there is circularity, there is reciprocity, because every act of knowing then brings forth a world, and all doing is knowing, and all knowing is doing. Speaking of action, and experience is far deeper, wider, and higher than from what occurs in our life on a purely physical level in relation to our surrounding world. The feature of human activity applies to all dimensions of our daily life, and the dimension we are working in right now is language. Every reflection invariably takes place in language, which is our distinctive way of being human and being humanly active. So everything is said by someone, and every reflection brings forth the world. So two sayings that are very important to remember is, number one, all doing is knowing, and all knowing is doing. And everything said is said by someone. So there can be no intellectual property rights because everything said is said by someone. These are two guiding lights to remind us where we came from and where we're going. Bringing forth a world is the burning issue of knowledge, and bringing forth a world manifests itself in all our actions and our being. It manifests itself without a doubt in the case of our values and preferences. There is no discontinuity between what is social and what is human and their biological roots. Knowing is effective action that is operating effectively in the domain of the existence of living beings. And that's where we'll stop tonight.
Wow.
With knowledge.
So it was making me think that there's no objectivity in out there, like everything's subjective, right?
Yeah.
But then knowing that requires a lot of objectivity, which is pretty cool.
It is. I mean, look at all the conundrums I've said tonight already. That knowingness, what is this? Or is it?
So there's a lot of of polarities in knowledge all the time happening, and they need to be there. They might appear to be controversies or
Right.
paradoxes, but they're not. They're part of that
That
duality
flow.
that has to be present in many levels and in everything and in different dimensions of thought. There's always that.
Exactly. Well, that's the flow, right? That's the flow of life. There can't be flow without this gradient, without this polarity. So, you know, so the flavor, here's one, the flavor of unknowing, of a knowing, right? We can go in the circle. There's nothing objective out there because everything has to be subjective, but yet it's a really objective, subjective. What was that you said?
Yeah, there's nothing absolutely objective out there, but to know that you have to be objective.
Yeah, but yeah.
Like look for that. Otherwise, you fall into the subjectivity of not know of ignorance, um, of and yeah, and then I wonder because it makes me all of this makes me think of so many things. It makes me think about the how I was thinking. Well, then what we're living, this chaos that's in the world, this system of non-living that is so elaborated, so grown, and at the same time it causes so much agitation, you know, so much war, so much suffering, so much unnecessary death.
Right.
And time that is part of the makes me think it's part of that swing of life, of that same life force. Um, in the Andean world, this duality is known as the Viracocha Pachacutic duality, the creator and the destructor, right? So it makes me think. So it's kind of like, yeah. So this process is necessary. I was thinking, I was challenged, I was feeling this. What's happening? This process of civilizational crisis and collapse is so full of life. I mean, if it's happening, it's because it's life wanting to overcome that, to polish itself, to it's life, it's the planet is the living entity wanting to grow grow from that, right? So that's where we need to be objective and not be subjective, not be kind of fall prey to that those negative entities that are going to want to keep us in the box of nothing's going to change. This is the mindsets that, you know, this is the reality, which is then it speaks of an absolute objectivity, right? Oh, this is non-changing.
Right.
This never changes. This is the only word of God, right? And so if we're not objective, if we're too subjective, then we're just gonna believe stuff. If we start being objective and actually start questioning ourselves and inquiring, as you exposed today, then we need that objectivity in our mindset, in our thought processes, to discover that the universe is then more subjective than we would like it to be, or that more subjective than we're told it is, right?
Yeah.
By the established knowledges, which are all so ontological, where they are a closed system. Well, I was taught that. I don't know how. So there's so much, you know, so much to think about, so much to really, so many exercises of really sitting down It's also about, I think, slowing down. You got to slow down and really, okay, so this thought, I'm thinking this, I'm believing this knowledge, but is it really something I think? Does it even really make sense? And we're gonna find so many double things, things that are out there in our own thought patterns, in our own behavior, and it's a process of just unweaving that and weaving something with a life again, and then away from this non-life kind of hologram, which is still there. It's very present.
Oh, it absolutely is. And that's what I told my acupuncturist last week when I went in for my appointment and we were talking. She said something again about the yang being out of balance. And I said to her, I've really come to the conclusion at this point in this dynamic unfolding of being in me that the yin and yang are perfectly in balance in nature, perfectly. She's operating perfectly all the time, wholly and completely perfectly all the time. What the problem is, and I'm veering away from saying that calling it the white male patriarchal system anymore, and saying that the yang is out of balance, because this pushes us into then it's feminism that says we just need to get rid of men because they're the whole fucking problem. Right? That's the whole other. But it's not. What's been heaving up in me is that it's not the yang that's out of balance, because nature is perfectly in balance all the time. So our perturbations cause perturbations in her, but it's the same thing. You're a community of 50 trillion cells. When you take a drink of water, it causes a perturbation in you. It causes a stress. But they take it in and they equate and they become yin and yang balanced again, right? So what's the problem is this grid, this eggshell of the dead mechanical system that we've been bound by. That's the problem, is the dead mechanical thought thinking that everything is a machine that has no life.
Yeah.
And that's what's breaking down.
Or takes our minds into this lifeless life.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. The dead earth hologram, as I like to say it. That's
pretty amazing, because it's like you see them living, you see the people living, but then at the same time it looks they're not kind of living. Their minds are not in their lives, something like that. it's pretty, but then it's all sure. I mean, as individuals, I think we still have this freedom of free will, so we still have the freedom to choose to stay in that hologram, right? And there's nothing worse than that. That's like the worst thing you can do. Or you can, get out of that and come back to life and start tuning into life and start weaving with life. And then you'll see that was part of it. I mean, you needed to go there to get here. I mean, and there's no wrongs.
No, there's no wrongs. But however, if you choose to keep yourself shrink wrapped by the dead earth hologram, the only outcome is death, because it's breaking. And that's what shrink wrapped, like I told you in the voice message last week, or we talked about it last week. I can't remember whether we talk physically or whether I leave you voice messages about the shrink wrapping that happens in eggs as they're hatching. If you know, if the membrane sticks to the duckling as it's breaking out of the eggshells, it will shrink wrap it and literally suck the life right out of it, crush it. Wow. And that's what, if we continue to allow ourselves to be shrink wrapped by this dead earth mechanical hologram system that's breaking down, death is the only outcome, physical death.
And to me, it's, I mean, worse. I mean, that to me wouldn't be the worst thing. Physical death wouldn't be the worst thing to me. Seeing that you're alive, that you're missing out on life, that you're alive but you're not living, that's kind of worse to me.
Yeah.
It's like you're missing out, you know, you're missing your life because you're all for that shrink wrap, all for that comfort zone. Let's make that comfort zone even more comfortable, which is really then not comfortable because it's sucking the life out of you.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
So it's amazing. So I still have to. You know, you taught us a lot about this inquiry, lots of knowledge there to preserve and to come back to. But then, how does that tie to the word sustain?
Well, because you're not well. Inquiry into life. How does life work? Life can't be sustained without inquiry. It can't unfold without inquiry. Remember, if you're not inquiring, you're not moving. You're stuck. An organism in equilibrium is a dead organism.
So I guess we can say that life is this inquisition or this inquiry of expansion.
Of the unfoldment of beingness, of being a human being, of being a divine dynamic being.
And of all being, the whole of life, the whole of the universe. It's kind of an experiment, right?
Yes.
Inquire about. So it's pretty interesting because it's kind of wanting to expand from its own governance kind of structures. Just kind of wanting to bend and expand that. But then at the same time, it needs some type of kind of line or
right
that keeps it together. It doesn't explode into just
smithereens,
incoherent, any pieces of incoherence.
Right.
Wow. So this is so deep and this is so profound and you know, I feel as we go into this and as we do this exercise that goes well beyond these conversations, you know, I feel like I'm poking into the medular spine of God or of the universe, and I'm having these really amazing experiences. They're very subtle. They're very in my psyche. Nothing that is happening physically to me, but really profound how as we start touching this, you know, we're swimming into what almost no people are really swimming into. You know, everybody's kind of shrink wrapped away from penetrating into this knowledge, and we're kind of like getting rid of that. So we're starting to dive into, hey, we can learn about the most profound things of the creation, but it's not just that, because when you learn about it, you actually kind of become part of it. Have you felt that you become part of that weaver of the universe?
Yeah. Which we are. That's the dynamism of beingness. Right. God is, yes, we are. That's the aloha part. The breath of God is in us. The breath of the divine is in us, and we are part of it. But we work so hard to keep ourselves as not part of it, thinking we're separate. So, you know, this comes to all these as we went through COVID, and I was watching all the before it's news for all the true news, right? All these Christians talking about the people, the humans perpetrating the dead Earth hologram, and their most favorite statement is they think they're God, they think they're God, they think they're God, and that is absolutely fallacious because they think they're above God. That's the problem. They're the ones walking up to the altar of creation and saying, we don't need you. We don't need the dynamism of being. We can do this without you.
It's then just a delusional kind of fictitious story they've written and they live on, and that has really no, or has very little real relationship with the reality, except that it's just everybody, except the fact that everybody's in that. Everybody's mind is kind of trapped by that.
Oh dear, you can't dare tell me that I'm God. Well, yes, you are. What did I just say about inquiry, dynamism? Mm-hmm. Ishmukane loved herself so much that she made you so she could see herself. Mm-hmm. She can't, if she doesn't have a mirror, if you don't have a mirror, you can't see yourself.
Yeah.
So yes, every one of us is God.
Yeah.
And it's our job to keep ourselves below the power of heaven, in between earth and heaven, as conductors, as hollow vessels to flow, allow the Shen to come in with the divine ideas of divine mind, all is mind, and allow it to mix with the yin to hold the new form of gestation that's unfolding with each cycle.
Yeah. Well, so are we, would this be the conclusion of the sustain branch?
Oh, no.
No means, oh, okay. So then that kind of answers my question, where there's a lot more coming.
Oh, there's a lot more.
Okay,
awesome. A lot more about knowledge, a lot more about inquiry coming. So.
Oh, cool.
Which will, and knowledge will ultimately lead us into the autopoiesis and reproduction, and
okay,
part of it.
So there's a lot more to hear, folks. I'm going to start maybe closing this session by inviting people to two things. One is to join the continuation of this amazing exploration of the universe next week, same time, same channels, at Aloha Ayni Living, on any of the channels that we have, YouTube, Rumble, Facebook, Instagram. You'll find posts, but you won't find the videos there. And the other invitation is to become part of this inquiry, of this community of explorers of the universe, by coming into the farm and getting your hands-on learning experience, hands-on universitas learning, hands-on
experimenting and crafting our daily living needs.
And that is not just that. That is, we've been with the exploration of the universe and the creation of the universe, because that's what we are also doing here. When you are brave enough to put yourself up there, then you are up there, and then you are part of the writing ink, of the ink that writes the universe.
Right. Absolutely.
It's a big gift that I don't want to say very few are daring enough, or yeah, you have the choice to elevate yourself into, just take yourself into a whole different level of value, of being way more valuable, way more free. You know, the more free you are, the more really valuable you are, because the less you're being exploited by the entities that exploit you and take the energy from you. So
Yeah.
So yeah, this is a big gift, an invitation for you to discover that gift in you, and that happens through joining the way, uh, with us, without us, but it's one way. It's the way of freedom. And if you want to check out what we're doing or join us, or go to the farm, you can visit the website Aloha Ayni, with only one A, ALOHAYNITAO living.com. Aloha Ayni living.com. It's pretty simple. And there you'll find information and where to contact and what to do. And we'll see you on the 82nd conversation for the continuation of sustenance of the great principle. So is that it?
That's
Should we
it.
close it?
Yeah,
Alrighty.
we can end the live stream.
See you soon.